Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It is August the 14th. A little bit of a rocky start, as sometimes happens. Got ahead of myself. Turn the stream on, turn the stream off. Welcome to the program today, folks. We're going to be talking about buried lead. I'm not hearing that word being discussed. I'm not hearing that title being discussed in the mainstream media, and I went through and looked at all the websites. It's not there. I actually think that it might be one of the most interesting sort of revelations from the Adam Schiff allegations that got dropped out there and the propaganda that is being spewed by John Solomon, who is still out there. Now he's going to run another thing. This feels like throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Hey, Americans, are you most excited about Adam Schiff? He's a real bad guy. He was pushing the Russia hoax. Oh, that doesn't hit you right in the feels? How about we tell you about Hillary Clinton? Did you know that the FBI covered for Hillary Clinton? They were allowing the Clinton Foundation to do a pay-for-play scheme in 2018. I'm flabbergasted. I don't know. I guess they just assume that we're that dumb. I had someone else let me know that FBI Barbie was out on Fox last night and talking about all the things that she knows about, which is very, very little, but she claims to have worked every kind of case that the FBI has. That's silly. I've touched a lot of different types of FBI cases. To say that I worked them would be kind of ridiculous. I've been around them. I know people who do that for a living and spend a lot of time doing it, but to go out there and make the claim that as someone who never did that kind of work, that you're an expert in everything, kind of iffy. For those of you that are watching over on our Rumble channel and you're looking to find the YouTube channel, the YouTube issue is that we were unable to connect the first time, and so it connected the second time. So you may have to go find the new whatever pop-up. It's out there. All right, so let's get into today's program with all of this sort of buried lead, which I'm going to explain to you why. That's the code name of the case that the FBI opened into the Adam Schiff whistleblower allegations, opened, and then, based on what I can tell, closed because it was not something they could substantiate, and it was probably hearsay. And it might have been covered by the fact that you're talking about a different branch of government. So let's just go with that. We're going to talk about those things. We're also going to talk about feds in DC and federalizing it. We'll talk about it a little bit more, only because the mainstream media cannot get enough of it, and they're very excited. I'm going to show you probably the single best piece of evidence that the federal government should not be involved, even better than NEAL Team 6. Anyway, we'll do a couple more things like that. Let's talk about Patriot Coolers first. My friends over at Patriot Coolers, you can reach their website by going to patriotcoolers.com. The promo code KYLE will save you 10%. That's always the case. Sometimes they bump it up a little bit. Right now, it's the regular attempt. It's the same thing that military veterans get. If you have a one of those like verify IDs, you can do it the same way, but you don't have to give them anything, and you don't have to be a vet to be able to go out there and support my friends. They also will support veterans with your purchase. So a portion of all profits go back and help veterans who are looking for mobility help, people who are struggling to move around in their own homes. It's patriotcoolers.com, promo code Kyle. We've got the 20 ounce, the lovely 20 ounce sitting here on the desk right now. Screw top, snaps down, works really well. You put your coffee in there first thing, and then you can enjoy it throughout the day at the temperature that you left it at. It basically will keep it for close to, I think, 12 hours hot. And it's hot enough that if you leave it steaming when you go into church, when you come back out, it'll still be steaming. Great folks. They've been supporting us since February of 2023, before any of you were listening, most of you. And we really appreciate you guys out there supporting them. Good company, good folks. Let's get into today's program. See what we can pull out here from buried lead. We'll try not to bury that lead. All right, and I'm going to troubleshoot something in real time here for my folks over on Rumble. I'm going to give you guys the link here. I know you guys are struggling. There's the link to the YouTube for those of you that are worried about it. It's right there. Very easy. All right, let's lead off with something that's not bad news. I think it's actually good news. I think it's the things that should be done. Not everything that the Trump administration is involved in frustrates me, and it shouldn't frustrate all of you as well. I think the people that are doing the best job are talking about it the least. And occasionally one of these stories will leak out, as in the mainstream will actually cover it. So we get to talk about it a little bit. Marco Rubio says the United States is in the process of a terrorist label for the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a long time in coming for people that have been working in the CT world and for folks that do sort of security studies. This is something that's been pitched at least for about 20 years. And this would be a good step forward at the end of the day. We've got Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing on Tuesday of this week that the United States is in the process of designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization here in the U.S. Why wouldn't you designate the Muslim Brotherhood and care? I just look at these organizations. We have a mayor's race in New York City with a psycho, with a lunatic. This is a guy named Sid Roseberg. He was talking about this, talking about the connections and the amount of money that mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani is supposedly getting from the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah, we've got a real problem. We've got a non-U.S. citizen or a non-U.S. born, 7 years as a U.S. citizen, a group of folks that are really kind of troubling, putting money into places where they probably are really scary. Now, I think if you listen to people like George Hill, who's been basically fighting Islamic terrorism for his entire career, you're talking about a ideology that we've been at war with for a very long time, and has certainly been at war with us for a very long time. I'm not the biggest Marco Rubio fan, but at the end of the day, the stuff that he's been doing out there seems like it's getting it done, and I'm not mad at him for that. He said, yeah, all that's in the works. And obviously there are 3 different branches of the Muslim Brotherhood, so you have to designate each one of them separately. We have this formal process for nominating people and putting them in, and then the State Department, which he's in charge of, will actually declare them that, an FTO, a foreign terrorist organization. It's the same kind of things that they were doing with some of these gangs. Kind of into that. Like I said, it's not all losses. There are people that sort of get what the threat looks like. And then there's people that don't. There's people that are pushing whatever the hell this is. Joe Rogan hosted Anna Paulina Luna a couple days ago. She was in town when I was on with Alex Jones, and she asked him to meet up. I thought that was very funny. I don't know why I found that funny, but Rep Luna wanted to meet up with Jones for lunch, and he was unable to do it. This lady's in Congress, and very likely is the first cocktail waitress at a strip club to ever serve in the august halls of Congress. I think it actually is appropriate for the time and place that we're in. She went on to talk about things. She's not very bright, and people that know her behind the scenes, I'm not going to name who they are, have told me she's a nice lady, but she's not very bright. She's a dull or dim-witted bulb. So she went on to talk about aliens, because what the hell? Like, you're on Joe Rogan, so why don't you just get high and talk about crazy stuff? Here's a little taste of that. This is how serious. Marco Rubio's nominating terrorists as terrorists. Anna Paulina Luna, staunch MAGA lady, also swimsuit model, also cocktail waitress at strip club, who may or may not have been involved in some of the activities there. Here she is talking about interdimensional beings. I feel like she should have done this on Alex Jones.
What specifically are you saying? Like, what happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. And that's not something that I came up with on my own. That's based on stuff that we've seen. That's based on information that we've been told. And then also, too, I think that there's this historical aspect of, this gets into the deeper theories and concepts of religion. And I think the history that we currently know, and that kind of spins off into another topic of, you have the modern day Bible, you have this aspect of Bibles or books of the Bible that have been removed that explain and kind of touch on these topics. And I think that we're in a time and age where you have such a vast amount of information that we have access to via social media, via your cell phone, via the internet. And so it's really changing the way that we understand, the origins of life and the spiritual reality that we know.
When you say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony, would be based on witnesses that have come forward, but what I can tell
So
you
the
is
witnesses just were told that they were interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
Okay. The reason that Americans are having such a problem with identifying such as the maps in the Iraq, every bit about this is like Miss South Carolina. Can you tell us what you would do to make Americans more educated about the globe? And she would tell you that Americans don't have good access to maps, such as I believe that people have said historic. What the shit did we just listen to? I listen to this stuff and I just go, that lady votes on your taxes. That lady votes on whether or not we would have a military action. That lady represents tens of thousands of sentient human beings in the halls of Congress. She is one of 435, thank God. How many of them think like that, talk like that, are unable to string together an articulate thought? Those were a lot of words. That was every bit as dumb as listening to some of the libs that are out there making ridiculous statements about white supremacy or gender ideology. It was just, that was nonsense. And what did you expect? There was this bar in Norman, Oklahoma, when I was going to school, when I was going to college, and the girls would walk around and they were all beautiful. They were all beautiful waitresses, and the T-shirt that they had said "hired for looks." And then the fact that this service was like okay, it was totally excusable because you realized they weren't hired for competency; they were hired for looks. I feel like that's what we just got right there. And the reason why I don't mind sort of pointing out how dim-witted and terrible some of the Republicans are, because they're just as bad. I watched Jim Jordan this morning. He's outraged about some of the stuff we're going to talk about. Oh, can you believe it? The Hillary Clinton scandal. Oh, no. Dude, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're not even in the right branch of government to do something about it. These people act like they're involved in investigations, but they're not investigators. And their charge is like from one little tiny line. And that's what they want to spend all their time doing, instead of doing the thing that they should be doing, which is creating line item bills to fund our government. You know, the reason why Mike Johnson was in? Again, there's competent people, there's incompetent people. They're on both sides. I assume that this lady also was hired for looks. This is Margaret, whatever the hell her name is, on CBS, demonstrating a complete failure to understand what happened. And then I also really get a kick out of smart people that don't do it in a mean way, but that sort of laugh that they have to talk to children. Sometimes you just have to instruct people and bring them along. Rogan does it in the nicest way possible. Like, he makes anybody not look like a complete fool by asking the question that's going to get to something you can actually talk about articulately, and he gets there with them. And so he did that. So God bless him for being a nice man. Howard Lutnick, who's the Commerce Secretary, doesn't seem to feel like he has to do that. But he's also not mean about it. This is a Face the Nation hit where they're talking about tariffs and a lady trying to do a gotcha. And then suddenly you realize, like, oh, maybe they actually do have to put 10% tariffs on the entire globe, including places where people don't live. You thought you knew what you were talking about, but you should have just asked one person what the idea was before you tried to do a gotcha on live TV.
Oh, the president stand in the Rose Garden holding up that chart that you helped make. That wasn't actually tariffs. That was actually confusing to investors because it was some kind of other formula, and the countries themselves seemed kind of random. Like, why are the Heard and McDonald Islands, which don't export to the United States and are quite literally inhabited by penguins, why do they face a 10% tariffs? Did you use AI to generate this?
No. The idea is
why are they on the list?
Left off. Because the idea, what happens is, if you leave anything off the list, the countries that try to basically arbitrage America go through those countries to us. Any country, like we had tariffs, the president put tariffs on China, right, in 2018. And then what China started doing is they started going through other countries to America.
Right.
They just built through other countries through America. And so the president knows that. He's tired of it. and he's going to fix that. So basically he said, look, I can't let any part of the world be a place where China or other countries can ship through them. So he ended those loopholes, these ridiculous loopholes, and now what he's trying to say is, I'm going to fix the trade deficit of the United States of America. It's a national security issue. We need to make medicine. We need to make semiconductors. We need to make ships. We need to have steel and aluminum. Come on. We need the greatness of America to actually be built in America. And he's tired of getting ripped off by the rest of the world.
Okay.
But I want to just interject my thoughts because I have my own thoughts, and my thoughts are gotchas. Can you let me gotcha? You're saying things that make perfect sense. That does make perfect sense. There's a loophole problem. Yeah. Okay, fine. This is, when you have global nations that have the ability to transact globally, they go and they co-op small areas. Maybe they buy it. Maybe they set up a trade deal. Okay, cool. That makes perfect sense. She wants to get in there so bad. Because none of this stuff is about being honest, and none of it's about being truthful, and none of it's about actually conveying information. An honest operator would say, I noticed that you guys had some pretty illogical, had some countries in there that I didn't understand. Could you tell me why we have a 10% tariff on this country? And then he would say it. But instead what you made is you made the Commerce Secretary laugh about it to you because you don't know what's going on. It's theatrical. I keep telling you guys, this is like wrestling. There's always some people in the wrestling world that are set up to fail because they're dumb. And then there's the sort of like the villains that are going to also win. Here's a villain that's sort of winning. This is the thing that that the suspendable crew, the former FBI guys that are upset about the way the Trump administration has been operating. We're most worried about someone like Gavin Newsom getting in and coming up there next. Because they're not fixing the problems that exist. And we're seeing this sort of like theatrical nonsense. And I'm going to play the end of it where we're going to go after Adam Schiff. We're going to re-adjudicate Adam Schiff from 2017. We're going to re-adjudicate like 2018 Hillary Clinton nonsense. That is not going to result in anything. It doesn't fix the problem. We're not going to fix the infrastructure. We're going to put federal agents on the street of DC. We're going to redistrict Texas. And then we're going to start an arms race where all the leftist states are going to do the same darn thing. These are not fixing the real problem, which, if you guys recall, the issue happened in 2020. Did someone fix the voting systems? Have we removed computers and the black box where you drop your little ballot in and then nobody knows what happens, and the paper ballot problem? Have we fixed that? No, we're just going to redistrict. And we're going to get the FBI to hunt people down. And we're going to get the Texas Rangers to go get people in Illinois. And we're going to do this big show of it. And Patel's on our side. And Ken Paxton's going to send out the Rangers to go round up the Democrats. We're going to take 5 seats. Okay, fine. Then they'll do the same thing. Here's CNN talking to Karen Bass, who's a communist. We'll tell you why she's not serious either. She's excited about it. Of course she is. Communists are excited about seizing power. That's what they do. And you're just giving them a great reason to. So are we really solving problems, or are we just breaking even and it looks like we're doing something?
Your state's governor, Democrat Gavin Newsom, announced that there's going to be a news conference tomorrow with other legislators, seemingly to lay out California's redistricting plans in response to Republican leaders in Texas doing the same. Do you support this gerrymandering tit for tat? Texas creates 5 more Republican seats. California creates 5 more Democratic seats.
Absolutely. And Jake, it's not really tit for tat. We're trying to save our democracy. And what this administration is doing is trying to dismantle our democracy. And so what the governor is doing is fighting for the entire country as well as California, because we're on the edge. I mentioned earlier, I was sitting on the floor of the House of Representatives on January 6th. I know this playbook, and this is what they're about. And so, yes, we have to fight to protect our democracy. And if they're going to come out and try to destroy it, then we have to fight to protect it. And this is one way to do that.
Oh, good. We're going to fight and fix democracy, and a January 6th reference for your bingo cards. So you guys get a couple of extra little points right there. Great stuff. What's going on in Los Angeles right now? Turns out the feds are doing something. This is a local news story, even though it's a federal case. This is what's happening in this lady's city that she is the mayor of. In theory, she would be the person that could tell the highest law enforcement officers at the local level to go and crack down on this. But suspiciously, this has to be a federal thing. This is the same lady that wants to get feds out of Los Angeles, right? And she's got to protect democracy. How about teenage girls that are being sex trafficked? Is that a problem?
Prosecutors say the gang recruited girls as young as 14 years old, many of them runaways or kids from the foster care system. Federal officials say those victims were regularly raped and drugged, all while being forced into prostitution. The alleged ringleader, a 25-year-old woman named Amaya Armstead, who goes by Lady Duck. Prosecutors say she and her co-defendants acted as pimps, using social media to recruit vulnerable teens and young adults, then controlling them through violence, drugs, and intimidation. According to the indictment, victims who disobeyed were assaulted, humiliated, they were denied food or drugs, and in some cases, branded with tattoos of their traffickers' street names.
I heard her just say denied food or drugs. Did you guys get that too? That's a weird thing to say. In great news coming out of Los Angeles, there have been arrests made in the burglary of Brad Pitt's Los Angeles home. It was burglarized, and therefore it was a high priority because his name is Brad Pitt. Detectives in Los Angeles have arrested 4 members of a burglary crew linked to local burglaries. So this is where the priority set is, also protecting democracy. These burglaries happened in June. Generally speaking, if you don't catch somebody in a few days, it's not going to happen. But that's not the case. Your name is Brad Pitt and you happen to be a Hollywood donor and you're someone who might have, like, you know, a nice picture like that, and people know your name. Los Angeles Police Department sources told ABC News that it appears the crew members were targeting wealthy areas of Los Angeles. We can't have that, but they weren't specifically targeting Brad Pitt. Lucky for them. The crew was apprehended in connection with another burglary, and the case is set to be presented to the district attorney for charging decisions, who will promptly drop the charges and do nothing and then release them so they can go back to doing the work of democracy. I'm being sarcastic because I don't know any other way to do it. All you got to do is look up any local news in any leftist city. I think I actually had a video clip yesterday of this guy saying, you know, joke's on you, Republicans. You want to go fix Washington, D.C., but almost all of the highest murder rate cities are in red states. Like 9 out of 10 of them are. And then you look at what the list is and you're like, yeah. And they all have Democrat mayors in common. They have this one thing in common, that people do crappy things where they think they can get away with it, where there's bad culture, where there's no accountability. Unless you rob Brad Pitt's house, then they're going to get you. This one's good too. I found this in Philly. Actually, this reminded me of what the feds could be doing with their time instead of what they are doing. This ended up being, it looks like, a state police investigation. And maybe even a local police thing, because the feds don't want to get involved with it. But millions of dollars were stolen in a string of armored car heists. I recall specifically that there was a squad that just did bank robberies and armored car robberies in Washington, D.C., out of the Washington field office. So this is what the FBI would do. And they weren't that great at it. Like, they had, I think these guys got away with like a dozen armored car heists, and I don't remember them ever getting caught. The first time they pulled off like $280,000 or $250,000 out of a Brinks truck. They waited until the guy was running around doing his cash pickups, and then they hit him. Same way that these guys are. You run in, you hit the truck while the guy is on the way back in with the bag of cash, and so he's sort of distracted, and it's only 2 of them, and 4 guys jumping out of the back of a Corolla with AR-15s. Then they hand over the money, and then they drive off. Then they hit a bunch of these trucks. They got like either greedy or drugged up, and so they were hitting these trucks and stealing empty bags because they were taking the bags before the guys even got them filled up. But in Pennsylvania, we're talking about more than $500,000 in one armored car robbery this week, connected to a string of heists in the Philadelphia area. Oh, Philadelphia. That's a nice place to go. Some of you guys have seen some of the videos of that running around where there's basically like zombies hanging out. So you can go and you can do fentanyl, or you can go see your Brinks truck robbed. It isn't clear if the robbery on Tuesday in the suburb of Philadelphia is linked to the others. They're out there just doing the best they can. This is part of a joint investigation. This is what you would expect your feds to do. Look at people who are organized, taking things that don't belong to them, and more importantly, using guns to do it. Instead, we got a press announcement out of Washington, D.C., which was like overnight. I'm actually going to read this to you because it's very funny. You guys ready for this? Kash Patel, overnight in Washington, D.C. The FBI and our partners, read that as our partners did this. Our partners equals like anybody that's in law enforcement that's out there, because with the FBI, everybody's our partner, made 45 arrests. And of those 45 arrests, 29 of them were immigration related. That's how good they did. So what? ICE did this? You had 29 arrests that the FBI is going to take credit for in a venue that they don't actually normally work. And then 16 were tied to the violent crime surge. This is that Operation Summer Heat they're doing. And they seized 3 firearms in DC. The charges include assault on a federal officer, which means they were out at night, and so they got into a fight because these guys are not cops. Possession of child sexual abuse material. Those are always righteous cases, but those happen every single week, especially in the FBI's Washington field office. I know that. Illegal firearms. I hate that term. Drug trafficking. Standard stuff. Fugitive apprehensions. That sometimes is not a bad thing. And a Subway sandwich assault. I don't know if he's making a joke or not, but your DC FBI is going to make them safe again. Let me just tell you how safe Washington, D.C. is. In 2023, a 17-year-old gang member carjacked an FBI agent of her vehicle. And she was armed at the time. And she was on duty in the middle of broad daylight. And she lost her vehicle. This is the New York Post reporting it. We do have a crime problem in this country. And the fact of the matter is that when you do and you let the right teams do the right thing, telling the FBI to let good cops be cops, which is what our current FBI director keeps saying, is dumb. Trying to re-adjudicate the Russiagate stuff or like the Hillary Clinton scandal of where they were doing pay to play with the Clinton Foundation. Do I want them held accountable? Of course. We all should. Should we act like that's an acceptable substitute for actually doing the daily job of this? And again, this is easy proof. A 17-year-old with no training, with no upgraded situational awareness, like no tactical knowledge, has probably spent more time and done more carjackings than that FBI agent has even done like door knocks because they're scared to go knock on the door and ask people questions. It was my favorite thing to do, to go knock on, knock on the public's door and ask about stuff when we would do the regular summer crime blitz, the surge about asking about murders that were unsolved in Washington, D.C., of which there are always dozens and dozens of them. Super easy to do. And then you get like really funny stories out of it where you ask a guy, hey man, there was a guy that was murdered here a couple weeks ago and he was shot right outside of your front door. It was 48 feet away from where your freaking door handle is. And the guy would be like, hey man, like I don't even know anybody in this building. I just moved here 10 years ago. And you're like, 10 years ago? That shows you how broken our society is, doesn't it? It was fun. And people were terrified. They're like all tactical and bladed out and trying to get to the corners of the door. You just knock on the door and then you just wait till someone answers the door at 11 o'clock in the morning and they're almost always shirtless or in their underwear or wearing some kind of robe in some filthy apartment. And you ask the questions, like cops have to do every single day. And then you see the way the feds do it. And the feds do it something like this.
Here's a real cop. He has a badge. He has sticky out. He has his name on his chest. That's a real cop.
Fuck no.
No.
He harasses citizens. He's not a real cop.
So that's not very nice. Those people were jeering the federal agents that were standing in the street. There were real cops there, so people knew the legitimacy of it. But you got a bunch of like white people that are out there crying about, oh, this is DC, like leave us alone, leave them alone, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the answer is he's actually not a real cop. You're a federal agent. It means you're not a cop. You don't have regular law enforcement authorities. And I used to try to explain this to my buddies. They were like, dude, it's kind of scary living next to one of the feds. And I'm like, yeah, I can't pull you over. I don't have that authority set. What you're seeing on the screen right now next to me is a takeover of the National Mall. This is the thing that Donald Trump was talking about. This is a real legit problem. It doesn't always happen in the National Mall, but what you're seeing is a bunch of teenagers and young 20s like out there on dirt bikes, which are essentially motorcycles, on quads because they don't have to get a license to buy them from a dealership. And they're out there rolling around on these damn things and they were tearing up federal properties. And they do the same thing on the DC streets where they're not allowed to drive and you don't see anybody arrest them. You know who can't arrest them? Federal agents can't arrest them. There is no probable cause for them to go and do some sort of federal nexus there. So are we getting federal agents cross-deputized under the DC Metro sort of home charter? Is that happening? Because that's not something I've heard articulated. And maybe that would make a little bit of a difference. But instead, what you're going to do is you're going to put all these agents in like really bad spots, and they're going to be either taking a knee or getting carjacked or the other dumb things out there. There's a real issue in Washington, D.C. with crime. But the answer is not like some of the stupidity that you keep hearing. And the craziest thing is, maybe craziest just for me, CNN seems to be the most sane voice, or at least bringing on the most sane voices to talk about it. I'm going to play you a couple of back-to-backs. It turns out the legal analysts that have to live in Washington, D.C. have all had a friend who was a victim of some garbage like this. And by the way, these people are all armed, or these kids are. A huge chunk of them will come out. They'll go and mob, take somebody's entire bankroll if they find somebody that's at a laundromat. I had an FBI agent actually tell me, I'll take it off the screen for a second. I had an agent that I worked with tell me that she was sitting at lunch, looked across the street, and watched like a gang of 20 guys go beat the crap out of a 16 or 17-year-old Filipino kid who was doing his laundry. And she was like, yeah. I was like, what did you do? And she was like, what could I do? And I was like, well, yeah. That seems problematic. Like, you didn't yell at them or say something. And she was like, no, it was just me. So you're going to put these people, these federal agents, in a position that they don't even have a legal authority to operate. And again, surging resources is not the dumbest thing in the world. Leave it to CNN to actually be the voice of sanity in all this. Go figure.
So I've worked extensively with police, and I don't have a problem tactically with what Donald Trump is doing here. He doesn't have to be the most dangerous place on earth. Something can be improving, but still really bad. If your house is on fire and then a third of the fire goes out, it's less bad, but it could still be an emergency. I work in DC. It is dangerous there. You cannot deny that. And a common police tactic is to surge resources. We call them task forces. They're applauded across the board, across the political board. I've done it in New Jersey. I've done it in New York. You take the FBI, you team them up with the Newark PD, what have you. You make a visible presence. Now, is some of it for appearance and show? Yes, because what it does is A, it assures people. It gives people a bit of confidence and security, and B, it deters people from committing crimes. So it's not going to hurt, and this is a situation that needs to be improved. I don't see why there's and I also reject the January 6th. Look, I've been a 100% unambiguous critic of everything Donald Trump did on January 6th. I believe he should have been charged criminally. I believe the pardons were a disgrace. But why does that mean he can't do anything now to enforce the law to promote public safety?
I think it raises questions about the
sincerity.
Sure,
he's a hypocrite. Fine, he's a hypocrite.
But this is all political theater. None of this is going to fundamentally address the crime problem in D.C.
Would you rather...
Whoa! It is political theater, but so is that. So is all of this. And of course, they brought up January 6th. Yeah. I mean, you can't make it up. You know what's funny about when you team up the FBI or any other federal agency with the local PDs? Do you know what the purpose of it is? Bigger investigations, more complex investigations, more long-term investigations into like organized crime. They don't go out and like march around in FBI vests on the streets of Newark, as he was just saying. That's not a thing. Nobody does that. That's not what Safe Streets task forces are about. Of course, there are federal task forces for almost everything you can think of, whether it be child sex trafficking, whether it be drugs, whether it be, interstate commerce stuff they're trying to do. Like, there's all kinds of ways you can team up. There's obviously the terrorism task force, which is the biggest, money tosser around to all these agencies. What happens is that the FBI just agrees to pay for overtime for a bunch of more senior, either cops, investigators, detective, etc. And the upside is that the FBI gets to steal those investigations and co-claim what we call statistical accomplishments. That's the trade-off. It is theatrical, 100%. But they're not wrong. Like, DC still sucks. What's funny is that the answer still continues to be, take it away. This is the actual conservative answer. Take it away from an area that has no voice or representation and give it to a state. Like, you took DC and you made it from Maryland. Give the parts where people live back to Maryland so these people can vote. Everybody crying about, oh, DC should have a vote, no taxation without representation. That's what they put on their license plate, people. For those of you who have never visited our nation's capital and seen the absurdity and the stupidity that exists there, you have abject poverty, like some of the most poor people in the country. You have some really incredibly wealthy people there, as you can imagine. And then they're all crying about not being able to vote. Okay, fine. You can get a vote, but you cannot be a state because you're not a state, because you're defined as such in the Constitution to not be a state. Give them back to Maryland. Let Maryland handle this. It's always the case that if you divest back down to a lower level of government, you'll probably find a better solution. Is it still going to be crappy? Of course. Maryland has horrible places to live. Baltimore, not awesome. The south side of DC, like Suitland and all this kind of stuff, they're not nice. That's fine. Make it their problem, and then at least they get a vote on it. And maybe those people go like, you know what? I'm sick of living in squalor. I don't want to deal with this. Here's the governor of Maryland, who is, by the way, far more articulate than the Fox News hosts, and making points that we just don't. He's very proud of the National Guard, but the National Guard has a purpose. I tend to agree. Like, 30 days, and then you got to find a real solution. The real solution is not long-term national federal government control of that area instead of home rule.
I'm just curious why you've been so critical of the administration trying to solve this problem. Is it the process that you don't like? Because it looks like they're doing the same thing that you're doing, which is surging resources to the city.
It's because I'm proud to be the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland, and I'm honored to be the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. I stand with the remarkable men and women who have raised their hand, these citizen soldiers, who frankly are trained to fight and win our nation's wars. The people who, in times of emergency and in times of crisis, that I have the unique authority and the unique ability to mobilize them, and where I have done so as the governor of the state of Maryland, whether it is historic floods that we've seen in Western Maryland, or whether it's the fact that I still currently, right now, have men and women who are deployed overseas doing operations. This is something that I take very seriously, particularly as someone who's worn the uniform, particularly as someone who's had to say goodbye to my family, particularly as someone who has had to trust the judgment of the commander-in-chief, knowing that the decision that they made was one that had not just the best interest of the national security in mind, but the best interest of me and my family. And so all I'm saying is this, is if we want to have a serious conversation about violent crime, we can have a serious conversation about violent crime. And I would love to be able to share the multitude of things that we are doing in the state of Maryland,
I would love to hear what the things you're doing in Maryland. Maryland sucks. Maryland's not America to me. I avoided going to Maryland unless I was going there for work. I never would spend any time there. I have no interest in it. If you live in Maryland, what are you doing? Like the funny thing is that like Southern Maryland is kind of like rural and farmy. I remember going to like a strawberry picking thing with my kids down there. And then you go to Baltimore and it looks like the zombie apocalypse happened and the human beings lost. Like we're in a post-zombie apocalypse world. It looks like it looks like Beirut videos that I saw from the 80s. It's crazy. And by the way, that answer that had nothing to do with the question. That's my favorite thing to do in politics. When you have someone who's like pretty skilled and articulate and smarter than the person they're talking to. Question. It's like, aren't they doing the same thing in DC that you've been doing? And it's like, I'm really proud of the National Guard. And when I served, there was great things. And national security is super important. And these people had to say goodbye to their families. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with the problem of crime in your state, which is unbelievably bad in certain areas? You have one of the worst cities in America in Baltimore. No answer. But what's that guy's name? Lawrence Jones or something? He doesn't always strike me as being particularly bright. So he asked this question. He did the best he could. He's not nearly as good as the CBS host who tries to butt in and shut it down. I guess shut your mouth and let the guy speak. But the guy spoke articulately about something that had nothing to do with it. Kind of Anna Paulina Luna vibes, except he's smarter and more articulate and more sophisticated. He's a little bit slicker. He probably has an opportunity to go somewhere else with it. All right, we're going to go further on with this, and then we're going to get into all this like Adam Schiff thing, which I actually have the 302 sitting on my desk, or the multiple 302s that were addressed, and I'm going to actually read some of them just verbatim because I want you guys to understand how silly this is. I'm also going to show you the Hillary Clinton bit that I told you that is now being circulated, so we'll give you the kind of tease on that stuff too. But before we do, let's just break over and say thanks to the folks at Silent. I use it every day. I use their products every day, and you guys probably should think about it too. If you don't have an opportunity to do this, invest in it, get one that works. Your phone is a tracking device. It can be used against you. Anybody who went to January 6th knows that. If you were a pipe bomber on January 6th, you know you can get away with it because you're safe. But government agencies and big tech, corporate data brokers, cyber criminals, anybody else that might want a piece of your digital footprint will just take it. The information is available through apps and other things. If you want to shut them all down, the only way to do it is to block all incoming and outgoing wireless signals that include cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, RFID, near-field communication, you name it. If it's coming out of your phone, it's used to track you. You can shut them all down with Silent products. slnt.com/KYLE is the website. It's the same kind of technology that special operations teams use. They're blocking this stuff. People in the national security realm are doing this for sources and for methods to be able to move it. If you want to operate in China, it's a minimum requirement for people that are working in these things. Yeah, are you using the same sort of threat environment? Probably not. But it's not a particularly expensive tool to have. You buy it and you can forget about it. We have one sitting on the desk right here, which is where my phone goes every single day. The upside of Silent is also you get to control whether or not people can even see that you called or that they called. It doesn't even go. It goes directly to voicemail. It shuts down your phone completely. You're not going to get text messages. You're not going to be interrupted. It actually makes kind of like a digital silence. It's nice. A cone of silence. slnt.com/KYLE. Drop your phone in the Silent Faraday sleeve. Get off the grid. Make yourself invisible to the outside world when you choose to. Good folks. Big fan. And I, you guys, I'm a gear guy, so I'm running that everyday backpack, that E3 everyday backpack, and I think it's really, really well laid out, which is not the case for every backpack that I've used. A lot of them, I get them and I'm like, why did they build this? Not so with the silent folks. Okay, so let me continue with the promised stuff here. We have an articulate answer. How about MSNBC coming in from the top ropes with sanity as well, right? Fox doing a bad job, CNN doing a decent job, Morning Joe and MSNBC actually honing in on the issue in DC, which I think is reasonable.
I live in Washington. This is personal for me. Many people are frustrated with crime that we see, particularly committed by juveniles in the city of Washington. People are frustrated, Willie, that when they go to CVS to buy deodorant, that they have to get it from behind locked plexiglass, right? But the response here, and let me say this, right? These are not just random anecdotes. What we see in Washington Post polling, among others, is that roughly half of DC residents, mostly half of DC residents, view this as a serious problem or an extremely serious problem.
I like it's either a serious or an extremely serious problem. Again, if an FBI agent is getting carjacked in broad daylight, you got a problem in your city. Did it go down? Yes. The story is they're like, hey, like crime's been reduced. Yeah, because it spiked. It spiked in 2023 and it slightly went down in 2024. They had something like 500 carjackings in 2022. Then they had almost 1,000 in 2023. Then they had like 500 again in 2024. And they're like, see, we reduced crime by 50% against a high water mark. It's still flood levels, right? And again, CNN, this is a Republican talking about this in this case. This guy, Brad Todd, is calling it out. It's like, can we just be honest that there is a problem? Again, but that doesn't mean that the Trump solution is the correct one. And we're using the wrong tool. And all of this feels like, I'm just going to say it, all of this feels like anything to distract from agency losses. What have they not been able to capitalize on? We have no J6 pipe bomber. We don't have Epstein files. Whether you like it or not, we don't have them. And they advertised it, not me. We don't have the story about the White House cocaine, right? We don't have anybody in the Biden crime family who was hawked on for years and years about all the illicit activity they did. We've also been told that their pardons are not legit because they were signed by an auto pen and there's an ongoing investigation. Who's being held accountable for that? This stuff doesn't actually take that long if you're trying to figure it out, unless you realize that you don't have the authority to do any of this stuff, in which case the message and the announcement of the problem is their actual solution. In the same way, a Jim Jordan sending a sternly worded letter, the hearing was the outcome. It's not that it's an investigation into something. No, we did the press release. That's what happens when you have a PR type government, when you have a PR type administration. And it does speak to the number of people that are in media that are part of Donald Trump's administration. They actually think that saying it is the win. I'm on the opposite side of the coin. I'll go to sleep. Show me the indictment, show me the arrest, and then let me know what the sentencing is after you got a plea deal or a conviction.
Let's not minimize the facts. I mean, Washington had 498 carjackings last year. That's way too many. There were 190 different killings last year in Washington. Our crime and murders are 6 times what New York is. Washington is not near safe enough. The D.C. police union supports what's happening here. The federal government does have an obligation to help keep the federal capital safe. And I don't think we ought to distract ourselves with what's really at stake here. And that is D.C.'s not safe enough, and the president's trying to make it safe.
Yeah, but I agree D.C.'s not safe.
With them great, actually.
Let's not minimize the facts. I mean,
DC's not safe. Yeah. Okay. Here's how I know this is not going to go anywhere. If Donald Trump was actually in a daily struggle to get DOJ on his side, to try to correct the problems in federal law enforcement and make sure that they were not weaponized against him and his family again, or you and my family again, like we don't want our families targeted, then he wouldn't say that he hopes Pam Bondi is going to bring something forward. He would say conclusively that we have something in the works, because they would have briefed him on what that thing is. The fact is that they've gone out and done announcements with Tulsi Gabbard, who's at DNI. That's not an investigative agency. They may do intelligence. They may learn things and uncover information, but they do not have criminal prosecution authority. Why do we not hear Pam Bondi going out and telling us, yeah, Adam Schiff's going to go to jail, and we're in the middle of it right now. Indictment forthcoming. They don't do that. They're just like slowly giving you this garbage. Here's Donald Trump saying exactly the same sort of thing. He's actually talking about the context of now he's got an opportunity to work against Russia properly, because for years he was plagued with this Russia nonsense. I've got some reminders of that, and that's exactly what they're doing with this Adam Schiff bit. They're just reminding us that a bunch of bad things happened. But if you're on the right and you've been paying attention even a little bit, you already know that. You know that we had an election problem in 2020 and that there were credible accusations of fraud. Whether or not you believe they happened or not is irrelevant. They weren't properly investigated by the people who could do it. And we know that because DOJ told us that. We also know that it seemed like Hillary Clinton got away with some really wild stuff under Jim Comey. So it wouldn't surprise you to learn that they covered for him. We had questions about the Clinton Foundation going all the way back to Haiti. How come nobody's talked about it? Because it's too late. So when you start dancing around and you answer questions like, I really hope Pam Bondi, I'm putting my hope in her to do the right thing. Tune in next week, folks, where we try to sell you something else.
With them great, actually. We had I had to go through the Russia hoax. And it was actually, it was a strain on the relationship. I actually told them, I said, you know, they got this phony investigation going on, Russia, totally phony, created by Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff, and Hillary Clinton and the whole group of them. And it made it very dangerous for our country because I was unable to really deal with Russia the way we should have been. I'm looking at Pam because I hope something's going to be done about it. These people put our country at great danger. And Adam Schiff, it was all made up. It was a hoax. The Mueller report came out. They all hated me. They had 18 Trump haters. And they said I did nothing wrong. They couldn't believe, they couldn't find anything. After years of investigation, it was all a hoax. It was a hoax created by the Democrats, but in particular Schiff and Crooked Hillary, the whole group. And now we've learned all the stuff that's come out over the last 2 months is incredible through intelligence. And hopefully something's going to happen with it. These are people that put our country in danger.
So he said, all the stuff that's come out through intelligence in the last 2 months. Has there been anything that is revealed to you in the last 2 months or in the last 2 weeks, let's say, that changes your mind about what happened previously? Is there anything that is or are these guys just going back to the well of the thing that they know that they did? Kash Patel's fame came out of what? Russiagate. Dan Bongino wrote a book about it. All these guys basically are going like, you know what's a winner? Go back and beat that drum. Things were very unfair in 2016, 2017, 2018, and the FBI was very, very bad. Okay. They're focused in on Jim Comey. What I haven't heard until this morning from Jim Jordan, nobody's bringing up Chris Wray. You know that guy that Donald Trump appointed to go be in charge of the FBI who did not fix this? Look, Schiff is a liar, no doubt about it. Like, he is a good liar when it comes to the fact that he seems like he's probably sociopathic in the way that he looks people dead in the eye and says things. But you'll notice you can't just say things that are false and let those stand. Sometimes you got to over-enunciate. Watch Adam Schiff re-say something or add to it. It's not adding any context. All he's trying to do is sort of like add more things so that one of those things might be semi-true. This was him doing the Tucker Carlson interview where he was asked to just explicitly state something and he has to add a little bit more to it. And then, of course, his answer is that I can't tell you because it's classified. I'm gonna read some of the stuff from this buried lead case because I think it's worth looking at.
On the Intel Committee, let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
All you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So, again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics.
And also, collusion is not a federal crime. Let's take 1 second here. We're going to do the Spotify ads, so they'll go up, so you guys have been warned. There they are. All right. Now, I'm going to read you some Adam Schiff stuff because the FBI did declassify this. Here's the bit that is most important. This is what's called an EC or an electronic communication. And it's kind of telling in so much as what it does and what it doesn't say. It's dated from October 18th of 2017. And the title of the EC, so this is known as a serial. That's just anything you file to your case. This serial is a call with FBI Special Agent blank blank. So they bleeped it out. It's coming from the Washington field office. It was approved by an acting supervisor at the time, so not the full-time supervisor. And then it says case ID number, which would be a Washington field case. It would say something there. That's also redacted. And it's called buried lead. That's the name of the case, buried lead. This makes it an intelligence case as far as I can guess. I don't think this is likely a criminal case. And the reason is because it has a classified, and the classification of the name of the case is not listed. It's a sensitive investigative matter, which means they're talking about somebody involved in politics. So you get what's called a SIM, same thing they did for Project Veritas, same thing they do for various academics and members of the clergy. The victim agency is not being listed, but there's a 3-letter, it looks like, agency that would be the quote unquote victim that was exposed. And then buried lead would be the name of the case. This is a code name case. That doesn't make it like super special, but the fact that we have someone that is declassified a code name case and the code name is actually declassified tells me this case is done. It's over. It's been wrapped up. And what you see in these declassified 302s, which again, they're going back to October of 2017, they're essentially irrelevant at this point. They've gone through, and I've seen other people do analysis and say, well, look what it says. What this says is you've got hearsay evidence. They did a couple of different interviews, and those interviews took place in 2017, 2019, and then again, a follow-up in 2023, which basically just summarizes the things that were said in 2017 and 2019. It appears that they're all from the same source. They all appear to be sort of circumstantial hearsay evidence. No direct evidence is listed. No documents recovered, no attachments are included, like the source submitted the following things, which is a phone call recording or an email that says this. They're just saying things that happened. And the odds are is that the end conclusion is in fact what the FBI concluded. They couldn't investigate this, whether for good or for bad. The FBI did not go to the congressional liaison personnel with the information because he believes that they too are embedded with the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Staff and cannot trust them to do the right thing. Rather, he approached a contact at the Blank's Office of Inspector General who advised him of the situation, said they'd be willing to discuss it later. This is essentially the outcome of it. They went out there, and this is the unclassified piece that was put at the bottom of a 2017 meeting. This is from the first meeting they did. This was in August 2nd of 2017. There has been some dissent among congressional members with regards to the Russia issue. Representative Jim Himes was asked about Adam Schiff. They basically decided at the end of this time that there was probably nothing they could do about it because the members of Congress were involved in what they consider to be speech and debate. You're talking about a different branch of government where they don't have unilateral authority to go after it. So now you're going to be doing nothing. So why are we going back to the hole? Well, it didn't actually hit the way they hoped it would. So they went out there and they've trotted out another thing. And that other thing is even more silly. It looks like this. Feds received whistleblower evidence in 2017 alleging Clinton Foundation wrongdoing. Oh my goodness. More on that in 1 second, okay? More on the Clinton Foundation nonsense in a second. First, let's do just the news. This is the same guy that you're seeing. This is John Solomon.
Tonight, we're going to tell you about the other Clinton investigation, one that was running in 3 separate FBI offices, New York, Washington, and Little Rock. It was a predicated criminal investigation that was examining whether Hillary Clinton ran a pay-to-play scheme that delivered favors from her perch as Secretary of State while foreigners and others paid large sums of money to her family foundation, the Clinton Foundation, run by Bill Clinton and their daughter, eventually Chelsea Clinton. 3 separate agencies, 3 separate bureaus, offices of the FBI believe they had predicated evidence to pursue that. Every time they tried to move the ball down the road in the shadows of the 2016 election, they got shut down. I mean, they got shut down at the highest levels of their agency. Andrew McCabe, the deputy director, a man who potentially had a conflict of interest with Hillary Clinton. His wife got money from Hillary Clinton's former campaign chair to run for a Virginia state senate. And by the way, McCabe attended the meeting where that assistance was solicited. He eventually was conflicted out, but not before he gave the order to his agents that you won't investigate or do anything on this unless I approve it.
Okay. Well, he had the executive authority to do that. Why? Because he worked for the FBI. And where does that authority come from? It gets delegated down from the President of the United States. Now, there's some real problems with the way that the left looks at executive authority and the way that they look at the FBI in particular. They think it's supposed to be this standalone agency. That's nonsense. But we're talking about John Solomon here, who I showed you yesterday from this June 19th, 2022 memo to the National Archives. He is a specific propaganda outlet that has been hand chosen by Donald Trump. And by the way, the other person on this list is Kash Patel. So these people are doing complete propaganda jobs on you. I'm going to go back to this little funny story here because I wanted you to see this headline. Feds received whistleblower evidence in 2017 alleging Clinton Foundation wrongdoing. Do you want to know when that story was written? It was in 2018 under Donald Trump's first administration. That's how dumb this is. None of this is new. None of this is is groundbreaking or bombshell type material. This is re-adjudicating old garbage because they can't get the narrative to move forward on something else. And obviously, at the end of the day, they want to get a win. They want a PR win, and this is their attempt to get it. So last night was that broadcast of John Solomon. And I don't know why John Solomon thinks that he should be on television in any way, shape, or form. He's terrible. He's absolutely he stutters. He has a lisp. He's not physically pleasant to look at. He might know a bunch of stuff, but he is such a crap way of pushing it forward. So they choose this sloppy looking guy who speaks inarticulately about something that we all knew. And he even wrote an article about it, and he actually did significant coverage of it 7 years ago. When a House subcommittee chairman gavels in next week to convene an unprecedented investigative hearing into the Clinton Foundation, two questions will linger as preeminent. Is the Clinton family charity really international do-gooding, or is it a place that suffers from corruption and illegalities, as conservatives allege? It's all been out there, guys. This is not new stuff. I'm not telling you that we don't have a corrupt organization or agency. We clearly do. And people like Andy McCabe were significantly problematic. But the time for a lot of this stuff has already passed. And to act like we're going to get it done, and then you hear Donald Trump in his own words saying, I hope, Van Bondies, hope is not a solution, folks. It's just as bad as cope. It doesn't work. We know that they lied. We know that they fabricated this stuff. We know that they went out there and they floated credibility that wasn't real. Here's a really good taste. This is actually an 11-minute video clip, which I might actually throw up on the Locals channel if you guys are interested in seeing an 11-minute time capsule. Watch this, where they're pumping up Andy McCabe and Frank Figliuzzi. There's some stuff that he left out of this, which is also seriously critical. By the way, all of these documents that we're seeing that are declassified, here's the big question. You ready? There's Adam Schiff. Okay, there's the story, buried lead. Here's the real buried lead. You know what a buried lead is? That's when they take the most important nugget, the biggest nugget of a broadcast, and they hide it somewhere deep in the story. So you're like, oh my God, they buried the lead. They didn't want you to either know about it or they didn't realize that was the most crazy part of it. The biggest piece of this is, do you believe for 1 second that the current FBI director, who's been there for a few months, has any idea how to dig this stuff up out of Sentinel, the FBI's databases, when we're getting credible reporting that he's out partying all night and that his security detail has to wake him up to go to work? Do you think that he's out there digging this stuff up and saying, oh my God, there was an entire classified case that was into Adam Schiff that was hearsay and it was closed? By the way, what they didn't declassify was the closing EC that wrapped up this whole case and said why they weren't going to go anywhere with it. That's part one. The second biggest piece of this is, who gave him that? Because I'm telling you, Kash Patel is not sitting at his desk and researching stuff in Sentinel. He's got people doing that. Who are those people? Are they the same people that I've been telling them are problematic, the senior executives inside the FBI who have nothing more than to either discredit these guys or are trying to save the FBI's reputation left and right? Because that's their seriously fundamental goal. How do we make the FBI look good again? Well, we'll just play ball with this guy. Or we'll tell him no a bunch of times until he does something stupid and he discredits himself, like we talked about yesterday. I have no doubt that Kash Patel is bent over backwards and he's going to have to do whatever the Democrats say. If he wants to stick around, let's say Donald Trump leaves in 2028, and so you get it turns over to Democrats. You think Kash Patel thinks he's going to stick around? Are they going to keep him on? Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. Who's feeding him these files and what is their agenda? Do you think there's a bunch of really patriotic senior executive service people that just love to see FBI exposed? Nope. Not even close. Here's the time capsule going back to some of the original scumbags. Frank Figliuzzi, right? Mr. Botox. Andy McCabe. This is an all-star panel of propaganda. It's just as bad as John Solomon. They're just more articulate.
We just heard from former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, Matthew Miller, former chief spokesman at the Department of Justice, Frank Figluzzi, former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, just sort of relevant there, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, and Chuck Rosenberg, a former U.S. Attorney who worked on the staffs of both Robert Mueller and James Comey at the FBI, all MSNBC contributors, all my mentors and advisors in this pursuit. Your thoughts?
We had some new news today.